We often believe that life is changed through 1,000 little steps, habits, routines, incremental improvements. And that's true, to a degree. But sometimes, life cracks open in a single moment. One choice. One conversation. One bold act. And while it may only take a moment, that moment is usually the result of wrestling with fear, shame, and uncertainty for a long time. Think about a time when you felt something deep in your gut, a truth you knew you had to speak, a change you knew you had to make, or a risk you knew you had to take. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It came from the slow build of inner knowing that couldn't be ignored anymore. And then, eventually, it reaches a tipping point. You either stay in discomfort by doing nothing, or you choose a different kind of discomfort, the discomfort of showing up and being seen. Courage is not about being fearless. Courage is about being afraid, being unsure, and doing it anyway. And most often, the most courageous acts are quiet, internal, and deeply personal. Saying I don't know. Saying I was wrong. Saying I need help. That's the kind of bold that rewrites the trajectory of our lives. The hard part is that it doesn't come with fanfare. It comes in silence. In stillness. It comes when we finally stop running from ourselves. One bold moment can be deciding to end a relationship that's been draining you for years, even when you don't know what's next. One bold moment can be walking into a therapist's office and saying, I don't even know where to start. One bold moment can be standing in front of someone you love and telling them the truth about something you've been hiding, not to hurt them, but because you can't live in secrecy anymore. It can be pressing publish on that first blog post, making the call to start your business, or admitting to yourself that you're not okay and maybe haven't been for a long time. The mistake we often make is believing that we need to wait until we feel ready. But readiness is a myth. That bold moment you're waiting for doesn't need your readiness, it needs your presence. It needs your willingness to be seen without the armor. The armor we wear, perfectionism, people-pleasing, numbing, self-sabotage, keeps us safe, but it also keeps us small. When we choose to put it down, even just once, we give ourselves permission to breathe, to expand, and to live more fully. What we don't talk about enough is the emotional whiplash that can follow a bold act. After the moment passes, after we speak the truth or take the leap, shame can creep in. That voice says, who do you think you are? What if they judge you? What if you made a mistake? That's normal. That's your brain trying to protect you. But protection isn't the same as peace. And comfort isn't the same as freedom. The difference between people who live wholeheartedly and those who feel stuck isn't that one group has less fear, it's that they choose to lean into that one bold moment despite it. They recognize the discomfort of staying the same is greater than the risk of change. And even when they fall or fail, they learn that falling isn't the end, it's the beginning of learning something deeper about who they are. One of the most powerful things I've learned in my research is that people who transform their lives don't necessarily change everything. They change one thing. They decide, once, to stop pretending. To stop hiding. To stop chasing approval. And that decision ripples outward in ways they could never have predicted. I remember interviewing a woman who told me that the boldest moment of her life was writing a letter to her father after 30 years of silence. She never mailed it. But the act of writing it, the act of telling the truth she had swallowed for decades, freed her. It didn't fix everything, but it gave her herself back. That's what a bold moment does. It reconnects you to your worth, to your agency, and to your truth. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a 10-step plan. You just need to show up. One time. One honest, vulnerable, clear moment. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. It might feel terrifying. But on the other side of that discomfort is a version of you that isn't shrinking anymore. A version of you that can look in the mirror and say, I did that. I showed up. So if there's something tugging at your soul right now, something you've been avoiding or denying, what if you did it once? What if you made the call? What if you had the conversation? What if you told the truth? You don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to do it. Doing something once doesn't mean you never have to do it again. But doing it once proves that you can. And that proof, that lived experience of courage, becomes the foundation you build on. It tells your nervous system, your heart, your inner critic, I survived. And maybe, just maybe, I grew. The world doesn't need perfect people. It needs present people. Honest people. People who are willing to risk being uncomfortable in service of becoming whole. That starts with one moment. One act. One truth. That's how change begins, not with a bang, but with a brave whisper. Do it once. That's all it takes to start. We live in a culture that often confuses vulnerability with weakness. We're taught from a young age to put on a brave face, to toughen up, to not let them see you sweat. Somewhere along the way, we internalize the message that asking for help, admitting fear, or showing uncertainty is something to be ashamed of. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness, but the birthplace of every single thing that gives life meaning? The truth is, vulnerability is the root of courage. You cannot be brave without first being vulnerable. Think about it. There is no risk without uncertainty, and there is no act of courage without the possibility of emotional exposure. Every time we love someone, apply for a job, share an idea, ask for forgiveness, or say, "I'm not okay," we are stepping into vulnerability. We're saying, "I don't know how this will turn out, but I'm going to show up anyway." That is not weakness. That is strength in its most honest form. The problem is, many of us have spent years building emotional armor to avoid the discomfort that comes with vulnerability. We deflect with humor. We over-explain. We stay busy. We pretend we don't care. But underneath it all, what we're really doing is trying to avoid being hurt, judged, or rejected. And yet, when we keep that armor on all the time, we also block out joy, love, connection, and growth. You can't selectively numb emotions. When you numb fear and sadness, you also numb happiness and gratitude. That's the cost of avoiding vulnerability. You may stay safe, but you stay small. We all have a choice to make. We can either let fear of vulnerability keep us locked in perfectionism, shame, and isolation, or we can lean into it as the path toward living a more connected and courageous life. And the good news is, you don't have to start with a grand gesture. Vulnerability isn't about spilling your guts to everyone or wearing your heart on your sleeve at all times. It's about being honest with yourself and with others when it counts. It's about showing up as the real you, especially when there's something at stake: your dignity, your dreams, your relationships. I've spoken with leaders, parents, teachers, and everyday people who've all told me some version of the same thing, that the most transformative moments in their lives were also the most vulnerable. It's the teacher who tells her students, "I don't have all the answers, but I'm here to figure it out with you." It's the leader who says in a meeting, "I made a mistake, and I want to make it right." It's the parent who kneels down and says to their child, "I'm sorry I lost my temper. That wasn't okay, and I'm working on it." These moments aren't just powerful, they're humanizing. They create trust, deepen connection, and open the door to real growth. Vulnerability is also where innovation and creativity live. You can't create anything new without risking failure. You can't solve big problems without risking being wrong. And you can't lead others if you're unwilling to be seen. We want to follow people who are real, not people who are perfect. We're drawn to authenticity because it gives us permission to be human too. But let me be clear, vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing or being emotionally raw with just anyone. Vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability, it's exposure. We have to earn the right to hear each other's stories. Sharing your heart is an act of trust, and it's important to share with people who have shown they can hold it with care. That's why finding safe spaces, whether it's a friend, a therapist, a support group, or a trusted mentor, is so essential. Healing happens in the presence of empathy, not judgment. One of the hardest but most freeing lessons I've learned is that you don't have to have it all together to be worthy of love and belonging. You don't have to fix yourself before you can show up in the world. You just have to be willing to be seen. And that starts with being honest about what you feel, what you need, and what you believe. It starts with saying, "I'm scared," or "I'm excited," or "I want something more," even when your voice shakes. And here's the paradox: when we're vulnerable with the right people, we don't feel weaker, we feel stronger. Because we've finally stopped pretending. We've finally allowed ourselves to be fully human. And that sense of being seen, of being accepted not for a mask we wear but for who we really are, that is where confidence is born. That is where resilience begins. In my research, I've found that people who live with the most joy and authenticity are not those who avoid vulnerability, but those who embrace it. They've stopped trying to outrun discomfort. Instead, they've learned how to sit with it, learn from it, and use it as a guide. They know that their stories, even the messy parts, have value. They trust that showing up matters even if the outcome isn't guaranteed. If there's something in your life right now that feels scary to admit or hard to express, ask yourself, what's the cost of staying silent? What would it mean to show up, just once, with honesty and heart? You don't have to leap. You just have to take one step. Vulnerability is the doorway. Walk through it, and everything on the other side, connection, courage, clarity, starts to become possible. So the next time you feel the pull to protect, perform, or pretend, take a breath. Pause. And remember that vulnerability is not the enemy. It's the beginning. It's not the thing to avoid, it's the thing to choose, on purpose, because that's where your real life begins. Would you like the next keynote expanded as well? There's something powerful about a single decision. One moment. One choice. One action. We often think of change as something gradual, something that builds over months and years. And while that can be true, what's also true, what's often overlooked, is that sometimes everything shifts because of a single, bold moment. A moment when you choose to show up differently. A moment when you stop shrinking, stop pretending, stop waiting. A moment that feels terrifying and freeing all at once. It doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes even invisible to others. But inside, it's seismic. Because it's the moment you decide to live in alignment with who you truly are. One bold moment can come after years of doubt, fear, and self-negotiation. It can come after you've spent too long tolerating what doesn't serve you. It can arrive as a whisper or a roar, but the clarity is the same. Something has to change, and you are the only one who can make that change happen. It doesn't mean you know what comes next. It just means you're finally ready to stop abandoning yourself. We spend so much time bracing ourselves, preparing for the fallout, rehearsing every possible scenario, managing outcomes in our minds. But the truth is, we can't control how people will respond to our boldness. We can't guarantee approval, applause, or even understanding. And that's what makes it bold. The risk isn't in knowing, it's in not knowing and showing up anyway. That's courage. That's integrity. That's growth. I've had the honor of listening to hundreds of stories from people who found their lives transformed not by endless strategy, but by one defining act. A woman who spoke her truth to a parent for the first time in her life. A man who walked away from a career that was killing his spirit. A teenager who asked for help after years of hiding their pain. These weren't easy moments. They weren't without consequence. But what each of these people shared was that, once they made that decision, once they leaned into that one bold moment, something inside them shifted. They realized they could live with discomfort, but not with regret. They realized that not speaking up, not taking the step, was its own form of pain. And that truth became louder than the fear. One bold moment doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require that you have all the answers. In fact, boldness often comes with trembling hands, cracked voices, and wet cheeks. It's not the absence of vulnerability, it's the full embrace of it. To take that step while feeling uncertain is to remind yourself that you are worthy of a life that reflects your deepest values. You don't need to earn that worth. You just need to claim it. And what's often misunderstood is that boldness isn't about grandiosity. It's not always about quitting your job or starting a business or walking away from a toxic relationship, though it can be. Sometimes, boldness is telling the truth to yourself for the first time. Sometimes it's saying, I need help. Sometimes it's the decision to rest, to stop proving, to take up space, to set one small boundary. That one moment of self-honesty, that one step toward congruence, is often the thing that creates a ripple effect you could never predict. It's easy to believe that your life will change once the timing is right, once the fear goes away, once things are more stable. But if you wait for fear to leave before you act, you'll wait forever. The conditions may never feel perfect. But that doesn't mean you're not ready. Bold moments aren't about being fearless, they're about choosing what matters more than the fear. Choosing your values. Choosing your voice. Choosing your dignity. What makes one bold moment life-changing isn't the external result. It's the internal message you send to yourself, I can do hard things. I can show up for my life. I can make a different choice. That belief once earned through action becomes a foundation. It becomes a well you draw from in the next hard moment. And then the next. Boldness builds on itself. It's not a one-time event, but a practice. That first time, though, that first time is everything. Because it proves that you are capable. It shifts your identity from someone who dreams about change to someone who does it. That doesn't mean everything will magically fall into place. Sometimes a bold moment leads to a fallout. People might not understand. You might feel alone at first. But what you gain, self-respect, clarity, peace, is worth every ounce of discomfort. You can rebuild from loss, but you can't recover time spent living a life that wasn't true to you. You don't get those years back. But you do get to decide what the next ones look like. There's a moment in all of our lives when we are standing at the edge of something. A decision, a shift, a truth we've been avoiding. And in that moment, we have two choices: lean back into safety or lean forward into growth. Safety might feel familiar, but it rarely feels fulfilling. Growth, on the other hand, is messy, uncertain, and often painful, but it's also where meaning lives. It's where we reclaim the parts of ourselves we've lost to fear. So if there's something calling to you, a conversation, a move, a truth, a change, don't wait for the fear to vanish. Don't wait for permission. Choose one bold moment. Choose to speak. Choose to act. Choose to live in a way that aligns with your heart, not just your habits. That moment may not fix everything, but it can change everything. Not because the world outside you shifts, but because you do. And that shift, that choice to honor your voice, your values, your vulnerability, is what sets everything else in motion. You don't need a plan for the rest of your life. You just need to do the next right thing, the brave thing, the thing that moves you closer to your truth. Do it once. Then do it again. That's how we create lives that are not just full but free. Would you like me to now expand the third keynote, or are you planning to compile these into a single longer speech? Shame is one of the most powerful, painful emotions we experience as human beings. It's the voice inside that whispers, "You're not enough. Not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough." Shame isn't just feeling bad about what we've done, it's the deep, often hidden belief that who we are is somehow flawed or broken. And because of that belief, shame isolates. It convinces us to hide. It tells us that if people really knew our story, they'd turn away. So we retreat. We put on masks. We perform. We stay silent. And the longer we stay silent, the louder shame becomes. What I've come to understand through both research and real human connection is this: shame cannot survive being spoken. Especially when it's spoken in a space that is safe, compassionate, and held with empathy. Shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. But when we tell our stories, truly tell them to someone who meets us with understanding instead of critique, shame begins to unravel. Its grip loosens. It begins to die. There is something profoundly healing about being seen and heard without correction or fixing. When we sit across from someone who doesn't try to minimize our pain or explain it away, but simply says, "I hear you. I'm with you," we start to believe something different about ourselves. We start to believe that we are not alone. And when we feel less alone, we feel more human. Because connection is the antidote to shame. Not perfection. Not achievement. Not pretending everything is okay. Connection. But for that to happen, we need safe spaces. And let me be clear, safe spaces don't mean comfortable places where we never feel challenged. Safe spaces are places where vulnerability is honored, where our stories are met with kindness, and where trust is protected. It might be a therapist's office, a trusted friend's couch, a small support group, or even a quiet moment with someone who has earned the right to hear your truth. What makes a space safe is not the absence of discomfort, it's the presence of respect, compassion, and emotional integrity. We often think that telling our story is risky, and it is. There's no guarantee how someone will respond. But there is a bigger risk in never telling it at all. Because when we bury our stories, especially the painful or messy ones, they begin to define us in the shadows. We start to believe that our story is something to be ashamed of, something to conceal. And when we carry that belief, we build lives around hiding. We overwork. We overachieve. We numb. We disconnect. All in the name of self-protection. But that protection becomes a prison. What's remarkable is how often people realize, only after sharing their story, how many others are carrying similar pain. Shame tells us we are uniquely broken, but story reminds us we are universally human. When someone says, "Me too," or "I felt that way," it chips away at the belief that we are the only one. And that is where healing begins, not in the fixing, but in the shared experience of being understood. But let's also talk about the courage it takes to speak. Telling your story, especially the parts you've hidden, requires bravery. It requires that you risk rejection in order to gain connection. And sometimes, that courage starts with writing it down for yourself, before you ever speak it aloud. Sometimes, the first safe space is the page. But eventually, if we want true healing, we have to bring our story into relationship. Because pain that's processed in isolation often festers. Pain that's processed in connection transforms. We all need at least one person we can be fully honest with, someone who won't look away when we cry, someone who won't try to cheer us up when we need to grieve. That person doesn't have to have all the answers. They don't need a psychology degree. They just need to be willing to hold space for your truth without flinching. They need to be someone who listens more than they speak, who validates rather than advises, who says, "That must have been so hard," instead of, "You should have known better." And for those of us who want to be that safe space for others, it means doing our own inner work. It means sitting with our own discomfort, our own shame, so that we don't pass it on to others. It means learning how to hold pain without trying to fix it. Because when we rush to rescue, we often send the message that the other person's pain is too much for us to bear. Safe spaces aren't built on solutions. They're built on presence. They're built on a willingness to be with someone exactly where they are. Over time, when we consistently tell our truth in safe spaces, something profound happens. We begin to reauthor our narrative. We stop seeing ourselves as the sum total of what happened to us, and we begin to reclaim agency. We begin to say, "This is part of my story, but it's not the whole story." We stop being defined by our shame, and start being shaped by our resilience. It doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means the pain no longer owns us. It means we can walk into a room without the need to hide. It means we can say, "This is who I am. This is where I've been. And I'm still standing." So if you are carrying something heavy, something you've never said out loud, I invite you to consider this. What if you told it, just once, in the presence of someone safe? What if you gave your story a voice, instead of letting shame keep it silent? What if that single act of speaking became the first step toward freedom? Because shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces. It loses its power when truth is spoken with courage. And when we tell the truth about our lives, especially the hard parts, we don't just heal ourselves. We create a space for others to do the same. We become the proof that healing is possible. That connection is real. That being seen won't break us, it will build us. And that, right there, is how we begin to change not just ourselves, but the world. We live in a world that worships perfection. From social media feeds to professional expectations, from parenting ideals to personal goals, we are constantly surrounded by messages that say, "Do more. Be more. Look flawless while doing it." Somewhere along the way, we start to believe that if we can just perform perfectly, if we never make mistakes, never fall short, never show cracks, then we'll finally be enough. Then we'll be worthy of love, success, and belonging. But the truth is, perfection is not only unachievable, it's exhausting. And chasing it steals from us the very things we long for: connection, creativity, peace, and joy. The real path to those things begins not in striving for perfection, but in practicing imperfection on purpose. That may sound counterintuitive. After all, we are taught to practice what we want to master. So why would we intentionally practice being imperfect? Because perfection is a myth. It's a moving target that's defined by other people's expectations. It keeps us small, stuck, and disconnected. Practicing imperfection means letting go of the need to please, perform, and prove, and instead embracing the messiness of being fully human. This isn't about sloppiness or a lack of care. It's about courage. It's about choosing to show up authentically, even when you risk being judged. It's about doing the work and letting it be enough, even if it's not flawless. It's about admitting when you don't know, asking for help when you need it, and allowing space for mistakes not because they're desirable, but because they're inevitable. When we practice imperfection, we are choosing to live with honesty and integrity over appearance and approval. Practicing imperfection is also a deeply compassionate act not just toward others, but toward ourselves. Perfectionism isn't the same thing as striving for excellence. Excellence is internally motivated, it's about doing your best for the sake of growth, purpose, or meaning. Perfectionism, on the other hand, is externally driven. It's fueled by fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. And when perfectionism is in charge, our self-worth becomes conditional. We tie our value to outcomes. If the outcome is good, we're good. If the outcome is flawed, we feel flawed. When we begin to practice imperfection, we slowly break that cycle. We start to separate our worth from our work. We begin to understand that mistakes are not evidence of failure, they are evidence of effort, risk, and learning. We start to see that we can be enough and a work in progress at the same time. And that's where real growth begins. Because when we are no longer paralyzed by the fear of not being perfect, we actually take more risks, try new things, and engage more fully with the world. This kind of practice starts with small moments. It looks like hitting send on the email before rereading it 20 times. It looks like posting the photo you love even if it's not filtered or posed. It looks like speaking up in a meeting without scripting every word. It looks like letting your house be a little messy when a friend comes over and trusting that your worth isn't measured by your day. It looks like laughing when you mess up instead of shaming yourself. These tiny acts of imperfection add up. They build tolerance for discomfort. They remind us that we can survive being seen as flawed. And what's powerful is that the more we practice imperfection ourselves, the more grace we offer to others. When we stop holding ourselves to impossible standards, we stop holding others to them, too. We become better parents, leaders, partners, and friends not because we have all the answers, but because we create space for people to be real. We stop demanding performance and start encouraging presence. We become safe places for others to show up, as they are, without fear of rejection. One of the most courageous things we can do is to say, I don't have it all together. And then live from that place. It invites authenticity. It disarms comparison. And it models something radically honest in a world that's addicted to appearances. There is nothing more liberating than realizing that you don't have to earn your belonging through perfection. You belong because you're human. Because you're trying. Because you care. And that is always enough. Of course, practicing imperfection doesn't mean we stop caring about quality or responsibility. It means we care more about truth than image. It means we are willing to disappoint the unrealistic expectations of others in order to stay true to ourselves. It means we trade shame for self-compassion and control for connection. It means we learn to sit in the discomfort of not quite right without spiraling into self-loathing. It's not easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest practices there is. Because it goes against everything we've been taught about success, respectability, and acceptance. But it's worth it. Because the freedom that comes from letting go of perfectionism is the freedom to finally live. Fully. Wholeheartedly. Imperfectly. You don't need to be perfect to be impactful. You don't need to be flawless to be worthy. You just need to be real. And real is always enough. So the next time you catch yourself hesitating, over-editing, or pulling back out of fear that something isn't perfect, pause. Ask yourself, what would it look like to practice imperfection right now? Could I choose progress over perfection? Could I be okay with good enough? Could I allow myself to be seen, just as I am? When we do this again and again, we rewire our relationship with ourselves. We stop trying to control the narrative and start living the truth. We give ourselves the gift of being human, and that gift becomes a gift to everyone around us. Practice imperfection. On purpose. Not because it's easy, but because it's honest. Not because it guarantees praise, but because it makes room for peace. And not because the world expects it, but because your soul needs it. Thank you, my friends, for supporting this channel. I appreciate every one of you. Thanks for watching.